The sprawling estate of the Brown family sat like an imposing white fortress atop the highest hill in Greenwich, Connecticut, a beacon of unimaginable wealth and calculated, chilly formality. This was the residence of Michael Brown, a self-made tech magnate in his late 40s whose name was synonymous with innovation and aggressive market strategy. His public image was flawless, a devoted family man, a shrewd businessman, and a generous, albeit selective, philanthropist. Yet, behind the manicured use and the impenetrable gates, the Brown Manor held a secret heavier and far more tragic than any market scandal. The secret was Thomas Rodriguez, Michael's father, a man in his early 70s who was supposed to be enjoying a golden retirement in the sun, but was instead kept in near total isolation in a rarely visited wing of the massive house. Thomas, once a vibrant and brilliant architect whose mentorship had unknowingly shaped Michael's early discipline, had suffered a debilitating stroke 8 years prior. His recovery had been partial, leaving him with significant mobility issues and an aphasia that made communication slow and frustrating. The official story Michael put out was that his father was traveling the world, seeking the best therapeutic care available, a narrative easily swallowed by the media. The reality was a gilded cage, managed with clinical precision by Michael's extremely private second wife, Linda Williams, a woman in her late 30s whose beauty was as striking as her emotional distance. Linda managed the household with an iron, invisible fist, ensuring every staff member understood the importance of discretion and the profound consequences of breaking it. Thomas was cared for by a rotating, heavily monitored schedule of expensive, non-English-speaking aides, none of whom stayed long enough to form a bond or even fully understand the subtle shifts in his declining health. He was less a patriarch and more an expensive, inconvenient relic. The atmosphere surrounding his wing was one of professional dread, a silent, pervasive fear among the staff that kept them walking on eggshells and avoiding eye contact with the few who dared to approach the corridor. The emotional temperature of the house plummeted whenever Michael was away, which was often his absences lasting anywhere from 5 days to 6 weeks, where Linda signaled to relax her already minimal pretense of care. Thomas became nothing more than a logistical problem. His meals were reduced in quality, his physical therapy sessions were canceled, and the medication schedule became lax and erratic. It was during one of these prolonged periods of neglect that a new temporary staff member arrived. Karen Gonzalez, a woman in her mid-20s, had recently joined the house maintenance team. Karen wasn't just a cleaner. She was a volunteer firefighter and EMT in her local town, taking these high-paying temporary jobs to save money for her next paramedic course. Her training ingrained in her a sharp eye for emergency signs and an instinct to notice what was wrong in a physical environment. Unlike the other staff members who deliberately averted their gaze from Thomas's door, Karen's professional code compelled her to observe. Her work often took her past the secluded wing, and she began noticing the abnormal stillness. The air always felt stale, and the subtle clinical smells of sanitizers were replaced by something heavier and sweeter. She couldn't shake the feeling that the environment was not conducive to healing, but to stasis. Her first concrete clue came during a required deep clean of the central air conditioning vents near Thomas S. Suite. She noticed the security cameras in that hallway had dust obscuring the lenses in a very specific pattern, suggesting they hadn't been fully wiped down in over a month, a glaring oversight in a home obsessed with cleanliness. More alarming were the discrepancies she observed in Thomas himself. She saw him wheeled out for a brief, supervised sunbath one afternoon. He was pale, almost translucent, and seemed to have lost significant weight since the staff photo she'd seen. His eyes, though, held a startling intensity, a desperate, silent plea that immediately resonated with her first responders training. He wasn't simply frail. He looked medically distressed. Karen started documenting the environment subtly, using her phone to take timestamps of the meal trays being left untouched for hours and noting the inconsistent times the night nurse made her rounds. Her firefighter's mind demanded data and proof, not just speculation. She began looking for the small, almost insignificant anomalies that signal a larger system failure. One afternoon, while replacing a light bulb in the dimly lit private bathroom adjoining Thomas's room, she found it. Tucked high up on a seldom-used decorative shelf, hidden behind an oversized porcelain vase, was a small, unmarked plastic container. It wasn't standard medical equipment. It looked like a repurposed supplement bottle, but its label had been cleanly removed, leaving only a faint adhesive residue. She quickly noted its exact location and the general size, leaving it untouched. The smell in the room was the next point of conflict. The nurse claimed she was administering a standard nutritional supplement, but Karen, whose EMT training included pharmacology basics, found the scent of the liquid, which sometimes pooled slightly on the discarded feeding tube, equipment faintly metallic and bitter, almost like a strong, poorly mixed sedative. This was not the smell of high-grade, vanilla-flavored recovery formula. She couldn't access the room without explicit permission, but her conviction grew. Thomas Rodriguez was not receiving the care he was paying for, and someone was deliberately interfering with his recovery. The idea that the wife of a billionaire would poison her father-in-law seemed insane, but the evidence of neglect and secrecy was undeniable. Every observation fueled Karen's inner conflict to speak up and risk her job, her future, and perhaps even facing legal trouble for unauthorized surveillance, or remain silent and watch an elderly, disabled man slowly fade away due to cruelty. The memory of the desperation in Thomas's eyes made the choice simple, though terrifying. She was going to find out what was in that small bottle, and she was going to get him out. This was no longer just a cleaning job. It was an undeclared emergency. Karen's internal struggle crystallized into a grim determination. The fear of Linda's retribution was now superseded by the moral imperative of her training primum nono Seraphicia, do no harm. She needed to identify the substance and confirm the pattern before she could make a move, as one false accusation could seal Thomas's fate and destroy her own credibility, using her limited access to the house's less guarded areas during the late evening maintenance shifts. Karen began her clandestine data collection. Her firefighter background, which demanded meticulous documentation of incident scenes, served her well. She started leaving tiny, almost invisible markers near the hidden bottle, miniature slips of her own hair or a smudge of specific cleaning compound, to see if it was moved or accessed. Over the next 10 days, the markers confirmed that the bottle was being used on at least 4 separate occasions, always coinciding with the day Thomas appeared particularly listless and unable to communicate even the simplest needs. The next critical step required a sample. Linda was hypervigilant, only ever preparing Thomas's feeding tube mixture herself in the privacy of his Suite S small kitchenette, locking the door and ignoring all electronic notifications during the process. Karen realized she could not breach that security, but she could exploit the disposal system. She managed to secure a piece of specialized medical-grade adhesive tape, and during a brief 25-minute window when Linda had left the manor for a charitable luncheon, Karen entered the kitchenette. She didn't dare touch the appliances, but she focused on the waste bin, deep beneath layers of discarded papers and food scraps. She located a few plastic medicine cups and the end of a used feeding tube, wiped clean but still carrying traces of the solution. She meticulously transferred the crystalline residue onto the adhesive tape and sealed it in a small, sterile sample bag she always carried in her emergency kit. This sample was the key. She couldn't risk sending it to a formal lab, which would immediately trigger unwanted attention. Instead, she contacted an old pharmacy school friend, Dr. Scott Nelson, now a toxicologist teaching at a regional university 2 states away. She framed the inquiry vaguely, claiming she was working on a medical drama script and needed quick, anonymous analysis of a complex, unusual sedative mixture that was designed to mimic the effects of a neurological disorder. Scott, intrigued by the chemical cocktail she described, agreed to run a rushed analysis. The results that came back via an encrypted chat 4 days later chilled Karen to the bone. The compound was not a single drug, but a sophisticated, slow-acting cocktail of specific benzodiazepians and a specialized anti-agent designed not to kill quickly, but to dull the senses, suppress appetite, and most crucially exacerbate the effects of aphasia, making the patient appear far more incapacitated than they actually were. It was calculated chemical cruelty, intended to make Thomas appear completely helpless and perhaps even hasten a natural, quiet demise. The psychological impact of this discovery was immense. Karen was no longer dealing with simple negligence. She was witnessing premeditated torture designed for financial or social gain. The emotional weight of this secret began to affect her. She slept poorly, constantly reviewing the surveillance footage she couldn't access, and obsessively checking on Thomas whenever her duties brought her near the West Wing. Her quiet compassion was now tinged with a righteous fury. The turning point came during a stifling Tuesday afternoon. Michael Brown was still absent. The official nurse had the day off, leaving Linda solely responsible. Thomas had been refusing his prepared meal, weakly batting the spoon away. Linda's composure finally cracked. Karen, working in the adjacent hallway, heard a sudden, sharp, muffled exchange. She crept closer, pressing her ear to the thick oak door frame. Linda's voice, normally smooth and melodious, was laced with venomous frustration. "Stop this, old man. I have things to do. Just swallow it. You are supposed to be asterisk, resting asterisk. The will clearly stated that until you are incapacitated ... and I can't have Michael questioning this asterisk, miraculous asterisk recovery when he returns." The words asterisk, incapacitated asterisk, and asterisk, quiet asterisk resonated with the toxicology report. Linda wasn't just maintaining control. She was accelerating the timeline of Thomas's decline, likely tied to a financial clause in the family trust that activated upon his complete inability to manage his affairs. Karen knew she couldn't wait for Michael to return, which was scheduled for another 8 days. Thomas's fever, which had been spiking intermittently, was now constant, and his shallow breathing was audible even through the door. That night, Karen decided to act. She could uncall the police with circumstantial evidence and the word of a cleaning lady against the renowned Millionaire's wife, not without risking having the whole situation dismissed as a staff vendetta. She needed direct evidence of the administration of the drug in real time. She borrowed a small, professional-grade fire safety Camry the size of a sugar cube, designed for inspecting wiring in tight spaces from the station where she volunteered, claiming it was for an off-the-books safety inspection. Under the pretense of checking the emergency lighting in the West Wing, she managed to secure the camera inside a ventilation grill in Thomas's room, facing the small preparation counter. The footage she captured the following morning was devastating. It showed Linda dressed impeccably taking a dropper from the small unmarked bottle she kept hidden, adding exactly 6 drops into the feeding tube mixture, swirling at once, and then forcing the liquid into Thomas's feeding tube with a cold, almost surgical efficiency, murmuring about her upcoming spa appointment. This wasn't neglect, it was calculated, repetitive, attempted homicide. The sheer emotional injustice of watching the frail, paralyzed man be systematically stripped of his consciousness broke Karen's professional reserve. She finally had her proof, but getting it into the right hands without being intercepted was the next most dangerous hurdle. She downloaded the footage, erased the camera's internal memory, and began making copies, preparing for the inevitable confrontation that was coming. She was no longer just a cleaner or an Ian. She was Thomas's last desperate line of defense. Her integrity, her commitment to the sanctity of life, and her profound sense of fairness had put her directly on a collision course with one of the most powerful and ruthless women in the state. The time for silent observation was over. The weight of the video evidence felt physical in Karen's pocket. It was late afternoon, and Thomas's condition was deteriorating rapidly, a direct consequence of the morning's dose. He was showing alarming signs of respiratory distress, and his extremities were cold classic symptoms of severe central nervous system depression. Linda, who had just returned from her outing, noticed the change, and instead of calling for emergency, medical help began a panicked, theatrical performance of grief and anxiety designed purely to look good for the few staff members milling nearby. She dramatically ordered the remaining nurse to contact their private physician. Dr. Peterson, a different, less scrupulous doctor, one on Linda's payroll, clearly aiming for a staged, quiet death at home. Attributing it to the stroke's complications, Karen knew the delay would be fatal. She saw Thomas struggle for air, his eyes wide and fixed on her, that same piercing look of pleading despair now magnified by terror. Her professional training kicked in instantly, overriding her fear of Linda's social power. She bypassed the formal chain of command and ran to the main security office, where the landline was located, dialing 911 immediately. She didn't announce herself as staff. She gave the address clearly and concisely, stating, "We have an elderly male patient. GCS 4, severe respiratory distress, suspected severe pharmaceutical overdose." Linda, hearing the commotion and realizing the severity of Karen's unilateral action, stormed into the security room, her theatrical sorrow instantly replaced by cold, incandescent rage. She screamed at Karen, demanding to know who she was, threatening her with lawsuits, arrest, and financial ruin. "You insolent girl. You will pay for interfering with my family's private medical care." Karen met her fury with the calm, decisive voice of an EMT giving triage. "I am calling the emergency services. His vitals are crashing." The term first responder momentarily stunned Linda, giving Karen just enough time before the phone was wrestled away. Within 6 minutes, The siren wail became deafening. An ambulance and a fire engine, responding to the specific overdose call, pulled up the long driveway, bringing a full team of paramedics and firefighters. Karen stepped forward, meeting the paramedics at the door, before Linda could regain control and spin her narrative. Karen looked the lead paramedic directly in the eye and stated simply, "The patient's name is Thomas Rodriguez. He's being intentionally medicated with non-prescribed sedatives. Check his blood work for benzo." This bold, professional statement immediately shifted the dynamic, changing the focus from medical emergency to potential crime scene, as the paramedics rushed in, stabilizing Thomas and starting advanced airway procedures. Linda was cornered by two officers who had accompanied the responders. Just then, Michael Brown's private jet landed unexpectedly early at the nearby municipal airport. He had been alerted by the alarm system triggered by the sudden influx of emergency personnel and was racing home, expecting a stroke or sudden cardiac event. Michael burst into the room, horrified by the chaos, his father struggling on a gurney, Linda screaming at the police, and a strange, determined maintenance worker standing in the middle of it all. As the ambulance pulled away, Michael, shattered and furious, demanded answers. Linda quickly pointed to Karen, crying she did this. Karen didn't argue. She calmly walked up to the distraught millionaire. "Mr. Brown, my name is Karen Gonzalez. I am an EMT. Your father is not suffering from a genetic issue. He is suffering from repeated, intentional chemical intoxication." She handed him a phone already open to the camera roll, showing the video of Linda adding the drops, followed by the picture of the hidden bottle and the toxicology report summary. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Michael's ragged intake of breath as he watched the footage. The images were undeniable. The face of the woman he thought he knew, replaced by the calculating predator on the screen, crushed him instantly. Michael, the master of market control, was faced with a betrayal he could never have controlled. His world fractured. He immediately contacted his legal team, ordering them to involve law enforcement and ensure his father received the highest level of protection and care. Linda was detained before she could even retrieve her keys. Thomas spent a grueling 20 days in the ICU, followed by 2 months of intensive rehabilitation where, finally free from the suppressive drugs, his aphasia and mobility showed marked improvement. He wasn't cured, but he was awake. When Thomas returned to the manor, now a place purged of Linda's influence, Michael was waiting. He was humbled, emotionally wrecked, and eternally indebted. Michael found Karen working a few days later, still quietly performing her maintenance duties. He thanked her, not with a check, but with tears and a handshake, recognizing that she had saved 2 lives, his father's body and his own soul, from the corrosive poison of willful ignorance. Michael offered Karen a position she couldn't refuse. Not just the promised paramedic school funding, but a role as the manager of wellness and estate security. A position that put her in charge of all personnel and, more importantly, put her de facto in charge of his father's comprehensive care team. She accepted, bringing with her a fierce commitment to integrity and a new, restorative atmosphere to the Brown Manor. The lesson learned by Michael was the profound importance of looking beyond the surface of a polished life and recognizing that true strength often lies in the quiet moral courage of the unnoticed. Karen, having risked everything, was rewarded not with wealth, but with the dignity of using her training to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The old architect was finally visible, finally safe, and finally communicating his gratitude, one slow, deliberate word at a time.